Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for being here, and thanks to EFLtalks, TESOL Greece, and my friends at BELTA for inviting me to take part. So I am very interested in the idea of talking about fake news and post-truth, this idea of the post-truth era, which doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. So obviously, I think most of you all know, be aware of the idea of what this idea of fake news and the post-truth is, unless you've been living under a rock somewhere, and I wouldn't blame you. But let's just deal with the definitions first. So, in fact, Oxford, it was their word of the year in 2016, was the word post-truth. The definition they gave was relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Okay, so it's this idea that basically, people are not using facts to make people motivated to probably vote for them or believe in them, but instead trying to just say to people what they think people want to hear. Yeah. So obviously it's been big news, but it's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time. In fact, as far back as in the late 1800s, there were two newspaper publishers in the United States called Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, and they had a kind of a sort of circulation war between them, trying to sell the most newspapers. And this thing called yellow journalism was invented, where they were basically trying to sort of create stories in order to get people to read their papers. They said, the famous quote from Hearst is, if you furnish the pictures, I'll provide the war. So this idea of, if you can get me the pictures, I'll make up a war, don't worry. Anyway, so it's not a new idea, but it is something that obviously has really come to fore in the last couple of years. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this does sound a bit political, James, and you wouldn't be wrong. It is. However, this, from my point of view, this isn't about trying to teach politics. It certainly isn't about sort of expressing your opinions about the world as a teacher and trying to make the students kind of come around to your way of seeing things. It's not about that. That's not the objective from my point of view. For me, it's more about the teaching of tools, of skills that our students can use, which will help them, whatever their political beliefs happen to be. I'm not interested in trying to make my students think like me. I don't believe that that's my role as a teacher. So, and I'm not the only person who has this view. This is Andreas, pronounce that Schleicher, I think, from the OECD, who says distinguishing what is true from what is not true is a critical skill today. Exposing fake news, even be aware that there is something like fake news that you have to question, think critically. That is very important. That this is something we believe schools can do something about. So it's this idea that this is part of an education system. These skills are they're around. People are talking about this, and this is something as English teachers that I think we can think about as well. So these are the key sub-skills that I would identify for identifying fake news. So some very important things here that our students need to be able to do. They need to be able to discriminate between what is a reliable source of information and what is an unreliable source of information, something that's easier said than done. They need to recognize when you have to verify the information and when you don't. So if you're literate and understand how the internet works and which sources of information are reliable, then you know when you have to verify something and when you don't. That's something a lot of our students don't have. just knowing how the internet works in general, internet literacy, you know, what's a good website address? Some website addresses look kind of strange. You know, the links, where do they link to? Or are there any links at all? The about section, the date of publication. If something was published 12 years ago, it's not going to be so relevant today. If it's news, that's an ability that some people don't realize when something is old. The ability to find a source. The source material may not be directly available to the students, but knowing how to find it on your own is not always easy. It's a skill. Cross-checking against other sources, the ability to do that, to find out what is true. Using fact checkers. There are lots of resources online to check facts. And again, it's a thing that you have to learn how to do. Identifying satire is an interesting one. There's lots of, you know, funny, satirical, deliberately fake news websites, and knowing those ones it's surprising how often people don't realize something is supposed to be funny. And my favorite one, preventing confirmation bias. Just to explain confirmation bias, in case you're not aware of it, it's kind of very nicely put in this cartoon here. So basically, to give a brief example, if you're someone who believes that the Earth is flat, and you go onto Google and you do a search for "is the Earth flat," and then the results come up, and the first 20 results, 19 of them say no, it's not, it's round, obviously, and then one says yes, it's flat, and then you go, yeah, look, you click on that link, you go there, you read it, and you go, yeah, see, I told you the Earth was flat. So you're looking for information that supports your pre-existing beliefs. This is something that everybody does, but it's particularly particularly relevant with fake news. Okay, so there's a teacher in the USA called Scott Bedley. He's not an ELT teacher. He's a primary school teacher, I think. And he taught his students how to read for fake news, how to use those skills. And this is his checklist that he created to use with his students, where these are the things that he wanted them to be able to do. I have a quote from him. I'll read to you, which is, I love this quote. He says, "Time will only tell if this lasts beyond my classroom, but the early impact outcomes are very positive. One intended consequence is that I now have 33 10-year-old fact checkers in my classroom that I've empowered to call me out if I'm sharing fake news." I think that's a fantastic image, right? All these kids together in the classroom go, "No, teacher, that's not true. Look, I have a source." I think that's a wonderful image. But of course, this isn't just about kids. This research was shown in 2016, where people were getting their news from. And it shows you that most adults, or a very large proportion of adults in the United States, are getting their news from Facebook and social media, particularly Facebook, which is known as being a place where fake news is shared much more than anywhere else. So it just shows that this is not just the skills that need to be taught to young people, but they need to be taught to adults as well, because it's adults who are sharing these stories and believing everything they read. Let me just show you this. This is a report done by Stanford University, and it basically says that this was with teenagers, and it was about looking at this photograph, the one that's in the background, about a story that was fake, and they basically saw the photograph, and the information they got from the photograph was so overwhelming that it completely overran everything that they actually, knew and could find out. Okay, so finally, to relate this more to English language teaching, of course, for me, this is about how you define yourself as a teacher. Now, this history teacher here, she could simply define herself as a history teacher who just goes there and delivers the historical content of the lesson, or she can teach a bigger lesson than this, which is to try and say, the reason you need to learn history is so you can understand your present. And as English teachers, we can go to a classroom and we can just sort of deliver grammar and vocabulary and stuff, or we can see ourselves as more than that and say the grammar and the vocabulary and everything else is a means to interact with the world. And that's how I like to define myself as a teacher, and that's how that's why I think this post-truth era is such an interesting opportunity for us as English teachers. Okay, so finally then I just want to say thank you very much, and I have a lesson plan about specifically to use fake news in the classroom, and there's a link and I shall post it in the chat box right now. So thank you, Rob. That wasn't 30 seconds. That's not bad, right?